Dr. Pope, I can't tell you how thrilled and excited I am to have you join us on Paul's Cast 357 today. It's been a long time coming.
It has.
Sounds good. Well, this day and age, we're faced with multiple challenges, and one of them, as you would agree, is the fact that, relationships today are not what I would say used to be back in the days of my grandparents and maybe your grandparents as well.
Right.
And one thing for sure as well is that this pandemic, has brought something out of us. Since we've been shacked up with our better halves, we've either made discoveries or rediscoveries about ourselves. And what can you tell me about what you think in your experience are the fundamentals of relationships?
The fundamentals of relationships, I think there's several, but I like to always talk about just some of the basics. First of all, in all good relationships, the communication, I think, supersedes everything. People have to learn how to communicate. Because if there's no communication, everything else breaks down. You take it from the physical aspect when it comes to sexuality, that breaks down when communication is not there. When communication is not there, intimacy breaks down. When communication is not there, just the intimacy, not just the physical, but the emotional bond breaks down. So communication, I think, supersedes everything from my experience. And also when it comes to good relationships, people have to be friends first. I hear that all the time where they just kind of fell out of love with each other. But one thing I realize, if that's your best friend, it's hard to fall out of love with someone who's not your best friend. And one of the things that I tell people, you can have the most popping, intimate relationship whatsoever, but if you're not close, all of those things will eventually fade away. But you have to be great friends first. You have to care about that person needs. You got to care about that person wants. You have to care about the significant other's desires. And also you got to be able to put them first in a relationship at times. One of the things that I try to help couples do on a day-to-day basis is that you got to communicate and you got to be friends with one another. And also you have to trust each other. And that kind of goes along with everything else. If two people do not trust one another, the relationship is not going to be built on a solid foundation. You have to trust each other's motives. You have to trust each other's attitudes. You got to trust each other even through the hard times and the good times. Because when you go through those hard times, you got to understand that this person has your back and then you have that person's back. And, another thing that I think all great relationships need, and I always say this and people always talk about it, you always preaching, God has to be the head. It has to be the head because in a relationship, you have to have some kind of standard. And one thing that I realize when I work with couples, even if people do not believe in God, because a lot of my clients, they have no inclination, but everything that I tell them are, guess what? Godly principles, all right? So it might not be God, 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 but everything that I'm teaching them, love each other, put each other above yourself. That's all biblical. All of those teachings are biblical. So in my experience, God has to be first because you got to have some kind of standard. If you do not have God first, your standard can be what you think or her emotions, your emotions, and a lot of times those don't work out well. So communication, trust, you got to have God first, and also you have to be great friends with one another. And I think if you can work on those things, a lot of the spaces in a relationships will be filled in.
Dr. Pope, I'm happy that you mentioned, the inclusion of God in the relationship. The day after Labor Day this week, a man, supposedly a pastor or a prophet, walked to his wife's job and shot and killed her. This has been one of the most devastating weeks that a lot of people have had, especially from Ghana, because he's from Ghana. That I'm from Ghana, so that's why it's very dear to me. It's a very callous situation that is weighing very heavily on my mind. This is a pastor, so I'm thinking that this is an individual in an institution that is expected to counsel people, number one, maybe couples who are getting ready to, get involved with each other, and also encourage them to stay in love, stay in harmony, and be at peace with each other. And also ultimately to have God in the relationship. But then he goes and does something like that. What do you think happened there?
Well, I was reading an article. It was about pastors and immorality, pastors and mistresses. It was a huge thing, but they were conducting a study on pastors, because as pastors, guess what? Most of them are there to comfort other people. But what this study was talking about, they have nobody there to comfort them when they're going through hard times. And this study broke down, it asked them several questions, and I guess the pastor, this was an anonymous survey, and they had to check the box of things that they struggle with. And of that survey, I think 70% of all pastors said they struggle with the temptation of extramarital relationships, pornography, and so many other different things. And then they had a question, how often do you get help with those things? And I think it was only about 2%. So pretty much a lot of pastors feel like they have this burden on themselves, but they don't have anybody to talk. And I think over time, you just get caught up in that lifestyle where, people are confessing, quote, sin to you, and you're trying to help other people, but you're not getting the help that you need. And I know what the story that you're talking about. I actually saw that article on YouTube about that situation. I was in Orlando last week, and I think it was still in the headlines. But I think that person, he wasn't being open about what was going on in their relationship. Because evidently it said they were on the verge of getting a divorce, and then I had to ask the question, who was in their lives helping them? Who was his mentor? Who was someone that he could have gone to and said, hey, brother, look, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? And then that opens up a wider box. I think men in general, we don't communicate. I mean, we don't talk about our struggles. And that's a whole different program right there. As men, we naturally don't talk about things that we struggle with, especially in the church. Because for a lot of us, we feel like if we're talking about our weaknesses, guess what? It makes us look weak. It makes us look like we're not a man. If we communicate those things to our wife, guess what? It makes us look less than a man. It makes us feel insecure, when that's totally goes against the Bible. But as society has portrayed men do not communicate their weaknesses. They don't talk about their failures. And definitely we don't communicate with other men like that. And we definitely don't communicate with our wives like we need to. Because I think women, they have the tendency, hey, they talk more. They'll talk to their girlfriends. They talk to the neighbor. I mean, they just communicate more when it comes to those things. But as men, that's an area that I think we have to grow in, period.
But you can liken this to a case of trust being broken here. And my concern here is, his followers, the flock, the congregation. Right. And one of the headlines trickling out of Orlando says the church is devastated by, obviously what took place. And, it makes you wonder, how do people recover from that? How does the congregation recover from that? This is a faith-based mission, and this is someone they've looked up to for so long. He has a 60,000, close to 60,000 strong following. And so, wow. There is that bit of I'm not sure what to, liken that scenario with, but clearly people's hearts are broken, they're devastated, and they're not sure how to, recover from that. And now we want to talk about how to move on from that, because you mentioned earlier that one of the ingredients in a relationship is trust.
Right.
So this is not a case of just two people who have either betrayed each other or have done something to each other where the trust is now broken, but you're talking about a multitude of people. And to me, these are God's people. So where do they go from there? How do they even start trying to heal from something of this nature?
Wow. Well, I just think, in my opinion, you got to just go back to the Bible. I mean, and I know I say that lightly because trust has been violated. Trust has been broken. And I think a lot of the members, like I said, I don't know how many members are actually in this church, but like I said, this guy had a following of 60,000 people. I mean, it's going to be hard to recover from that. And I'm just being honest, because some people might go all the way to the left and say, man, I put my faith in this guy. And if this guy can do something like that, and he was a God-fearing man, and he was a hypocrite, so I don't even want to talk about God anymore. I know that's going to happen with some, a percentage of people. You never know what it's going to do with their faith. And then you're going to have a lot of people, it's going to actually probably draw them closer to God. Because if they were putting so much in that person or that couple, kind of like, you can't make them God. And I hate saying that, but a lot of times we put people on a pedestal, but everybody is, sins. And I think that needs to draw them closer to God. But it is going to be a time of recovery. It's going to be a time of grieving. I think it's going to be a time where some people just might lose their faith in God's kingdom. And I'm just being honest about that. Because I think when you have people in those kind of roles, you don't realize the magnitude that you carry as the shepherd. I know a situation, and I know this person personally, where his pastor was involved in an extramarital affair. And his wife actually caught him, and it kind of blew up. And I know for that young man, it hurt him tremendously. It cut him to the heart. And it took him years to kind of get to the point where he wanted to, get back active in another ministry because of that. So what I'm saying is, I believe this is going to be almost like the same result, because people are hurt. It seemed like they were loved in their congregation. I know I saw a couple posts where he had put, if you need prayer, if you need a healing, several flyers that he had, put on his Facebook page. And I don't know how many people he directly worked with, but this is a stumbling block. And I think this is something that happens with men. We are, sinful. Things happen. I'm not saying murder is right, but what I'm saying, no man is perfect. And I think that's why we have to make sure that we're putting our faith in God's word. And I think for his following, for his members, I think they just have to, stay close to God, be open about how they feel. If they feel like they're struggling with God, they need to talk about it. They need to be open about it. And just be real and have conversations. And some might need coaching or counseling after this, because that's very traumatic. But it happened. And I think my thing is that, people just it's gonna make people closer to God or push them further away. But if you're being pushed further away, you need to talk about it so you can get the help that you need, so you can, because this is a man, this God didn't make that guy do that. Evidently, they had things going on in their relationship that I don't know if people knew about it, but evidently he had a lot of things going on that he wasn't talking about, that he didn't have people in there helping him through it. And I think that when we get to the point where we're not getting the help, when we're struggling with certain things, anything can happen. And evidently it got to the point where he felt that he had to do something about it. And, it's sad. My heart goes out to the members of his congregation. My heart goes out to the people that followed him, who put their faith in this man, that he was a man of God. But like I say, everybody sins. And I'm not trying to justify, but I know that everybody has their issues. And I think this man, he didn't get the help that he needed, or whatever, the couple didn't get the help that they needed, and it escalated to this.
I know you mentioned, counseling at the beginning of your conversation here with me. Now, I've had to be counseled by a minister who, before I knew it, was getting into detail and almost describing, what we need to do in our bedroom, for example. And I thought that that was a little bit over the top and inappropriate, because it almost sounded as if, he was either being, he was either fantasizing about, my spouse, or just didn't have a good angle from which to, counsel me as he wanted to do. So my question here is, since almost all relationships have their own peculiar circumstances around them, who is the best source or individual or an organization that any couple should approach for premarital counseling? Because yours is totally different from mine. There may be similarities here and there, but I just feel like this is almost like an on-the-job training. It's a work in progress. There's most things that may never ever get to be covered as you sit through a premarital counseling, or even with wedding vows. There's just a handful of them, but then you get home and then so many different issues crop up that were never covered. So how do we really approach this whole counseling issue?
Well, I think the first thing that I always tell my clients is that you want to pick someone who you feel comfortable with. That's the big thing. I mean, because like a lot of my clients, they come off a referral and it's just a match. You have to feel good about the person that you choose to receive coaching or counseling from, first of all. And then you have to understand what both of them bring to the table. Like for me, when I first assess a client, I have a little survey where we just talk about what is something that you want to work on. That's what I talk about, because it's easy to go in there and try to diagnose everything, but my perspective might be different than their perspective, or vice versa. But I talk to couples first of all, and I talk to them, what do you want to work on? So they bring that to the table first, because a lot of times, let's say if someone's coming to me and they understand that, hey man, we have an issue with communication. And if they don't know what the issue is, guess what? We do that little survey so we can kind of figure out what's some of the top 3 things that you want to work on, and then kind of go from there. And I say, if you have a coach, if the coach is doing more talking than you are 90% of the time, that's not a good coach. Because with me, 90% of my counseling, I'll say 70%, because I do like to talk. 70% of my coaching is listening. And I really do believe, just like the great coach, Dallas Cowboy coach, I can't think of a time, Landry, I think. He said that the best coaches are people who bring out the best in you. So what does that mean to me as a coach? I know that when couples come to my office, they realize that, man, they want to be together. They understand that it's something that's hindering them from being together. So what I do, I know that they have the answers within themselves, but through coaching, through listening, through direction, guess what? I can help that person to be the best who they want to become as a couple. So that's how I run mine. So you have to feel comfortable and also kind of know what you want to work on sometimes. Because I know when I have couples, and I only get with couples together, I don't get with a woman by herself. I don't roll like that. All right. Now, a lot of times I do get with men by themselves, to talk to them about how they're feeling. But I don't get with women by themselves. Okay. I get with couples together. And sometimes they have no clue. But as you have dialogue, certain things will come out. Like, for instance, let's say I was working with a couple and they had no clue. They said, my wife brought me here. I don't know why I'm here. But while we were in a session, guess what? He started getting aggressive with her, yelling at her and trying to put her in her place and quoting scripture. So I said, okay, ding, ding, that's an area that we can work on. And when his wife started talking about different things, that area just opened up, that he was controlling, that he was domineering, that he had this warped view of God, that women had to just submit to everything that he said. So we were able to help him through that. So a lot of times with my coaching, I listen to the needs of my clientele. But for the clients, they have to feel comfortable with me as well. And for all the intimate details of the bedroom that you were talking about earlier, we don't go into all of that kind of stuff. But what I do say when it comes to relationship for the sexual piece is that whatever you two feel comfortable with in your bedroom. Now, do I condone bringing other people and pornography and all that? Now, that's just because I'm a Christian coach. I don't talk about that kind of stuff. I don't believe in that. You'll be surprised how many coaches tell people, yeah, if you want to have this, if you want to have that. I don't believe in that. You know what I'm saying? But I try to help people to have the best relationship that they possibly can while they're there. Before it's intimacy and you need to do this, you need to know. But I do tell my men that you need to think about her needs first. All right? She needs to think about your needs first in the bedroom. And a lot of times in relationships, that don't happen. Especially with men, we just want to, you know what I mean? We have hours and, hey, time to go to bed and, wake up. But thinking about her needs first. And that's probably as deep as it gets, unless someone wants to talk about those things.
Going back to this minister and his, now deceased wife, obviously there were a lot of things that they didn't know about each other, and it may have caused a strain, and obviously that's why they were estranged from each other. How do you pick your ideal partner? And my other question also is, since you mentioned the fact that you're a Christian coach, say you have a couple who don't exactly share the same faith, but feel that they're in love or care for each other enough to want to be together, but obviously there are all these hindrances and I guess psychological blockades and so much else that get in the way of two people who feel like they are ideal for each other from getting together. And this has gotten in the way of a lot of couples. I mean, these situations crop up all the time, even when they have the same faith.
Right.
We're taught that if you're not equally yoked, then that's an issue right there. Mm-hmm. You have to have that balance before you actually even set off on your journey. So who's the ideal partner? Let's talk about the couple who probably just met, or maybe have just spent a little time getting to know each other. Mm-hmm. They may not know it all. I mean, they may not see everything or understand everything. Mm-hmm. So how do you know for sure that you're walking into the right relationship and your partner, the one that you've chosen, is the ideal one for that matter?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think different things. Like my thing is almost kind of going back what I told you, the top 4 things for the relationship is concerned. You have to be friends and you have to communicate. Because I'm being honest, you can be infatuated with someone, but the divorce, if you look at the divorce rate statistics, a lot of times people don't have hard conversations while they're courting each other, while they're dating each other. So I can like someone all day long, but if there's things that we know that we have to talk about, you have to start talking about some of those things. Like, for instance, let's say if I'm a Christian and my wife is a Muslim. Okay, well, let's say my girlfriend is a Muslim. Those are things that can divide a relationship if you all are on common ground. Now, can it work? Of course it can work. But you have to understand it and be willing to go there in the beginning of the relationships. Once you say that this person is getting serious with me, or I'm getting serious with her and I want to take it to another level, you have to talk about different things. Because I'm being honest, the divorce rates in America, a lot of people get divorced. Let me just tell you some of the reasons why people get divorced that you might not even think about. He wants kids and I don't want kids. Okay, huge issue. And it sounds like something that people would talk about while they're dating each other, but they don't. Okay, religious issues. People get divorced in America all the time over religious values. My wife goes to church 24/7. I hate church. I just want to go Christmas, Mother's Day, and Easter. People get divorced over these things. Finances. Okay, I want to do the bills. I don't want her to do the bills. People get divorced over there. I have 3 different checks accounts. She has her own. People get divorced. And the reason why I'm saying this, communication is so important in the first part of the relationship. Couples have to learn how to get deep and go there on issues that might be shaky. I work with so many couples who have been dating for 2 or 3 years, and they're on the verge of getting married, but they never talked about kids. They never talked about having a house or an apartment. So a lot of these conversations have to happen. Now, is there a remedy if couples are gonna, be successful? If I like someone today, will I like them in 3 years? Will it work? You won't know that. But my thing, you talk about a lot of the hard things in the relationship once you start getting serious. And I think that will help. So if you all communicate and you're on the same page up front, so if you do want to get married, you're dealing with different things. You're talking about different things. Something simple as family. How involved are you with your family members? So you got to talk about a lot of this stuff up front once you realize you're getting serious. Because one thing I tell people in a relationship in marriages, it's not going to just get easier. A lot of people think this little gold ring right here means that much that your whole life is going to change overnight. Once you say I do, oh man, we're closer than ever. Because if you're struggling with certain things now while you're dating, guess what? When you get married, those things amplify. Because it's not like you can just go out. Hey man, like for me, when I was dating my wife, I didn't want to talk to her back then. I know it was a long time ago. We didn't text. I didn't call her. I was like, man, I forget her. I'm doing my own thing for a minute. But once you say I do, you can't run away from your relationship.
Right.
So I tell people, deal with a lot of those issues up front first. Because because I've seen people who were totally opposite for his religious beliefs, child raising, but they talk about this stuff up front. So they go in it in a proactive manner as opposed to someone who gets blindsided. And I think that's a big thing that couples can do when they are on equal ground for, off balance. You get ahead of this stuff and you talk about it, you deal with it, and not try to deal with certain things once you say I do. So hopefully that helps.
It surely did. And, there were a couple of things you mentioned in your remark just now that it's moved me on to my next question. Mm-hmm. There's all the things you could talk about. There's all the lists that you could draw up and say, okay, well, let's tackle this and let's talk about this. And let's find a common ground before we actually decide to tie the knot and move forward. But things change.
Right.
For example, when I married my wife, I wasn't what I am today. Mm-hmm. All right. As far as my career goals are concerned, she always had her career goals. She always had, a straight path ahead of her that she was going to take. It wasn't the same for me, And so you could almost always say that, for argument purposes, these things will happen in couples' homes, in marriages, in relationships, where one person is going to become something that they never were or never even thought that they could ever become. So let's say, for example, with this pandemic that we just we're still going through, people have had to, work from home and that sort of thing. And so perhaps your job requires you to constantly be on the phone, whether you're texting or on the computer or making calls, which, like you said, in your days was not exactly the case because technology played a very little role in people's homes back then.
Right.
All right. I used, we'd walk or go to our girlfriend's house without ever having to call ahead of time or text or anything. But we're living in these times now where your spouse has the right to feel that your attention is more towards technology, social media, maybe you work on like you, for example, you've got a business page on Facebook. You have to get on there. You have to communicate with your clients. You have to do it all. But maybe it's just the sign of the times or the times we're living in. But not everybody is going to condone that. And not everybody is going to be relaxed about the fact that their spouse can always just be distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we could talk about communication. We could talk about the fact that, well, these things are likely to crop up in the future. But as we've just seen with this couple in Orlando, Florida, it was a total breakdown. Maybe on one part or one person's part, it was a total complete breakdown to where they just gave up. All right. How do we maneuver our way through this really rather sticky and tricky situation, having technology play such a huge role in most people's homes right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you just got to count the cost on technology. That's what I tell people. You have to have parameters set up. Now, if you're working like in this COVID situation, man, there should be a lot of flexibility going on both parties. Let's say if I have to be, if my wife knows that I have to be on the phone or I have to be on a computer doing Zoom sessions 5 or 6 hours a day, and that's how I pay the rent, I mean, there has to be some kind of flexibility with that, as opposed to going to a 9 to 5. So I think couples, again, and this is where I talk about that trust factor in that relationship where you're communicating and where you're talking to each other, you have to compromise and you have to understand that. Now, on the flip side, if you're not working and you're supposed to be spending time with your spouse and you still doing your social media, your Instagram and all of this kind of stuff when it's just for pleasure, that's when it gets a little sticky there. That's when it gets a little sticky and y'all have to have some kind of boundary. You have to talk about it. Because if you're doing stuff for work, I believe that if someone loves you, she knows, hey, that's your job. Hey, man, do your thing. But if it's time that you all supposed to have been together and you're still tied to that phone, you're still tied to that computer, whatever, that's when you all have to talk. I'm being honest. I know my wife had to talk to me, and we have to talk to each other about that all the time. Now, my wife, she doesn't like Facebook. She just goes on there to see her family. But for me, and I need to use it more, but the only time I'm on there is really just for business, kind of looking at the current trends, seeing some of the hot topics that people in my field are speaking about. But I know I can get on there just to chat, just to check out the ESPN football game scores and different things like that. And we have to talk to each other. And my wife, she goes on there to watch movies and YouTube, like the hair stuff and all those little shows. So we have to talk, like something like, babe, can we spend some time with the family? Or she had to say, honey, can we spend some time with each other and put up the phone? So every situation is different. But technology is here, it's not going anywhere. But I think in the household, if it comes to a husband and a wife, you all have to communicate and understand what the parameters and the boundaries are. And then I guess that's just my thing on that, because I work with couples with that. Trust me, one of my clients, he played video games all the time. That was his thing. He played video games about 6 hours a day. Worked 8 hours and played video games for 6 hours a day. So that was a couple sessions that I had to help him with, but his wife had to be open, talk about it, and deal with it. So I think every situation is different. But I think, again, it goes to that communication piece. But again, if you really thinking about what your wife is saying or how she's feeling, you will be aware of that if you want this relationship to grow. But if like I said, if it's about making money, y'all talk, and there's a insecurity with it, that's a whole different ball game. So I hope I answered your question with that, because it's a sensitive issue. But like I said, with the COVID, if people are working, it's just people just need to be flexible with it, because this is where we are now. It's the times that we're living in. But outside of that, if you're on Facebook too much when you're supposed to be spending time with your family, those are things that couples need to talk about and deal with.
Dr. Pope, a lot of people were saying that this lady should have seen the signs and just simply walked away from the marriage, even when she was encouraged to call the police because of her husband's threatening behavior and that sort of thing. She should have, read between the lines. And that's also sort of going around, with many other people saying, well, as far as marriages go, you don't have to stick in there. You don't have to, stay in it, especially when it's abusive or, all you have to do is just pick up on one little sign and then pack your bags. So the big argument here now is, we're taught and we're instructed to make it a covenant, which means that till death do us part, versus, having to write it up like a contract and say, well, if this deal is not working, then all we have to do is, just simply walk away. I mean, let's say trust is broken. That in business terms is breach of contract, which is grounds for termination of the contract. So, we're in the modern times, things aren't as they used to be when the old folks would say back in the day, when stuff got broken, we fixed it. We didn't just throw it away and find a replacement for it. We had to work hard at it and fix whatever is broken, versus now where you could actually literally have drive-through divorce courts. And, if you just happen to type in anything related to divorce on the internet, you wake up the next day and you're flooded with all sorts of, unwarranted or unwanted, correspondence from all these divorce lawyers all over, the country, as if to say that you're being encouraged to just get it over and done with. All right. What's your take on this, Dr. Pope?
Well, put it like this: when it comes to divorce, again, everybody's perspective is different, because I know what people are saying. She should have left him. There were warning signs, and like I always say, hindsight is 20/20, and you never lived in that person's shoes. One thing I realized when it comes to divorce and people being together, everybody experience is different. I remember years ago, I felt myself judging people, like, why does she stay with him? Why does she do that? And I think even with my mom, and I know I told my father this, he was physically abusive at the end of their relationship, but he was very verbally abusive growing up. And I remember I would tell my mom when I would see that, why are you still with him? First of all, she said, you don't understand. You're young, you don't understand. And she said, I still love him. And I realized that there's hope that he might can change. Until one day she said, hey, y'all, he went to work. He was going to be gone for 2 days. She said, get the U-Haul, we out. And we left. And now my father and I, we're the best of friends. And I share this story a lot. About 20 years ago, he called all of my siblings and apologized for being a bad dad. He said, look, I didn't know what I was doing. I just did what I saw my father do. He really got real, and that just did something to me. And it kind of changed my whole mindset of prejudging, because you never know someone's experience. A lot of women stay with their husband because they feel like, hey, I can't do anything else, or I need him. Some men, they're controlling to the point where the women feel helpless without them. They're codependent. And you figure with this pastor, think about the shame that this lady might have underwent if she said she was going to divorce his wife publicly. I mean, she was going to divorce her husband publicly. I mean, you never know what's going on in the lives of people. She might have been thinking about, man, it might hinder somebody's faith if I leave him. It might hurt their relationship with God if I step away from this relationship in a public manner. So you just never know. But on the flip side, to answer the other question, when it comes to divorce, I think things are different these days. I think things are different. I think that as soon as couples go through something difficult, oh boy, it's time to check out. I had a client, with one of my other businesses, and they had been married for 65 years. Okay, the next day I had a client, they had been married for 50 years. So both of the clients, I asked them, I said, what's the secret? I said, I work with couples all the time. I said, what's the secret? And both of the couples said the same exact thing. They did not know each other, but they said the exact same thing. They said, when we got married, it was for the good, the bad, the worst, that we were going to be in there for the long haul. And she said, with a lot of young people these days, as soon as one issue, and I'm not talking about extramarital affair or domestic violence or that goes on in the household. I think that's a whole different thing. But she was just talking about little issues. You don't agree on this. You don't like this. You don't want this to happen. And as soon as one issue came up, she said the young people want a divorce. She said nobody wants to really stick in there and try to work it out. Certain things aren't called for. If somebody's abusing a spouse, hey, that's something you got to deal with. That's something you got to make a decision if you want to stay or go. But with the outside of certain things, just because you disagree, but that's how it is in society today. I mean, people want to get a divorce for almost anything. Or they have their friends telling them, hey, I wouldn't go for that. You need to get a divorce. And a lot of people getting advice or from people who've already gotten divorced, right, or who aren't happy in their relationship. So it's just a lot of different things that go on with that. I mean, it's like an onion. There's so many different layers to that. But we don't know what that person has gone through. We don't know what that person is needing at the time, why they decide to stay with that person. But in hindsight, it's always, man, they should have left. I saw the warning signs. But you don't know why that person's not leaving. You don't know what's going on in that person's head. That person might be getting a threat. Like, if you leave, I'm going to do this to you. I mean, you just never know what's there. But I don't think in any relationship, people should accept being abused. Mentally, spiritually, or even verbally abusive. So that's just my take on that.
But it happens.
I'm really adamant about.
It happens all the time, and it doesn't seem like there's any end to it. All the multiple issues that crop up, and as I was saying earlier on during this conversation, even the vows that we take when we get married, they're only so little. They just a handful of them. People fight over diapers and teaspoons and, who's taking the trash out and so on. I mean, arguments come up just out of nothing. Right. And half the time, especially with divorces, we've never gotten to that juncture before, in a marriage, except, if you've already been through one and you have remarried, but most people have not. And so they have this rather thin threshold, and it just gets thinner and thinner, and then before you know it, they're just not sure how to handle any situation. How dare you try to walk away with stuff I've toiled so all my life for, or half of my fortune, and you get to keep the kids and I don't. We made them together. Yeah. All kinds of things crop up, and then it becomes, very, very volatile, don't you think? It
is. I mean, I think divorces are volatile. I mean, it's a situation where both parties are stressed out. And with my practice, what I like to do, I like to help people before they get to that point. Because I think in all relationships, like my wife and I think the reason why I get a lot of clients, because I just keep it real with people and I talk about my journey. Like I say, growing up, like for instance, I never wanted my wife, I felt weird or insecure every time she had to redirect me or give me, quote, construction criticism. I'm coming out with a book when my book is finished, and I can't wait, to get it published, actually getting published now. And I share a story in my book about when I first started public speaking. And my wife was like, hey, honey, you did a great job. And then she said, but if I was you, you could work on X, Y, and Z. Now, as soon as she said the X, Y, and Z, I didn't want to hear it no more. It's like, oof, I just closed down. So we talked about it, because I'm a stuffer. I stuff stuff, especially when I first was married. And I'm sharing this story because everybody has a journey. Everybody grows. But for me, I didn't never want to take constructive criticism from my wife. And because it made me feel so insecure. And instead of me really just saying, honey, thank you so much for it, I can work on it, it made me kind of swell up like, what are you doing? Why are you attacking me? This is not the time for that. And I share this because everybody goes through different things, you know, and no marriage is perfect, but it's about growing and working together. If you have someone who has your back, even through hard and difficult times, and my wife, we've had a lot of hard times. Definitely our good times definitely outweigh the bad times, but we've had a lot of challenges. But I think the way that you get through them is by communicating, putting God first, trusting each other, but allowing yourself to grow and allowing yourself to mess up, allowing yourself to heal. And so oftentimes when it comes to relationships who are running toward the divorce court, they're not allowing themselves to go through that process. The process is being hindered because of, you know, because they want out, or because they think they can't do it, or because they think that they're not equipped for it. But they're not allowing themselves to go through the process. Like, I've been married 25 years. My wife, we got a lot of healing, hurt, I mean, in our relationship. But we're here today because we allowed ourselves to go through the process. And so oftentimes, as soon as the storms come in relationships, guess what? Somebody's out. And the crazy thing, and this is what I learned, a lot of people that end up leaving, if they don't start working on themselves, guess what? They will take that same mindset, that same character trait into all of their other relationships because they don't allow themselves to go through the process and work on themselves. So that's my take on that. You know, you gotta be willing to go through the process. Because all of us have had our struggles. You've married for several years, you know.
Yeah.
Marriage is not easy. It's tough.
Right.
But you got to allow yourself to go through the process if this is the person that you want to be with for the rest of your life.
And this is why I kind of feel like, you know, we, based on our experiences, we probably need to throw a little bit of caution to the wind, because what I sort of see happening is that a lot of people, I wouldn't just focus on young women, although it seems as if to them, it's a bit more important for them to get hitched. But I feel as if young women are under some duress or some sort of pressure to find somebody, because it becomes, you know, I would say something to the effect of their reputation, you know, at stake. Their biological clock's ticking. There's pressure from the church. There's pressure from the families. There's pressure from their friends who have been through it. What would you say to such individuals? Because you and I both know it's not an overnight thing to where, you know, it's all rosy once you tie the knot and the ceremony is over. That's the wedding part of things, but you have a journey ahead of you with so many untold situations that are likely to crop up. What would you say to such people?
Talking about people who just want to jump on this roller coaster of just marriage or feel like that's the end for all, or?
Yeah, because, you know, sometimes it feels that way. Or you look at some of these young ones, or some of these individuals who've never been married, and once they do, you get the impression that they feel as if it's all over now. This is my life. This is it.
Right.
But it's really not.
It's not. I mean, I think women and men, there's double standards. I mean, that's just being honest. When you think of a man that's not married in his 40s, oh man, you're a gigolo. You're a player out.
Right.
I mean, whole different mindset. But a woman, she's in her 40s, like you said, oh man, biological clock is ticking. She's washed up. And then if she's not married, guess what? The next question, do you like men? I mean, do you know what I mean? It's all kind of things, but it's a double standard.
Yeah.
What I tell women, don't rush. Love yourself. I mean, don't settle. And stop believing the lies that, you're washed up because you're not married now. And I believe that because we have a really good friend whom I love. I mean, we've known her for about 30 years and she's not married, and she goes on this roller coaster, frequently about that. But and I know it's tough, and I can't relate, because I'm not her, and my wife can't relate because she's not married, but we're there to support her. But I see it all the time with young women. And when I mean young, I'm talking about, under 50 years old, who are getting, a little more mature in age. And it's just the way society is. I think that it's really tough on women in that sense, right, as opposed to men. I think in Atlanta, what is 6-to-1 ratio, men and women. I mean, it's like a man could pick whoever he wants to, but women, the numbers are a lot higher for the number of people in the city. So I just think it's a double standard. But what I tell people, love yourself, don't settle. I was on a show several years ago, and this one lady was sharing her testimony about how she always wanted to get married. She always wanted to get married. She was about 37, 38 at the time when this happened. On her 4 days before her wedding day, she found out that her fiance was married. And it really took her down a tailspin. But then she started thinking about the warning signs about 6 months later. Okay, why he couldn't do this? He never could meet here. He always called me at night. So, but she said something that was profound. She said, I was blinded because I wanted to get married. She said, I was so caught up in marriage that I did not even think about myself because I saw it, but I didn't want to see the sign. And she learned a good lesson. She said, I have to start loving myself. And
I have two very important questions before we wrap this up, Dr. Pope.
Okay.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, there's two very important questions you don't want to miss, and you're going to hear from the Pope in just a second. I want to ask you this, and this is something that, I've toyed with for so long. Most Christian-based, counselors would, and even pastors would say that, abstain from any type of sexual activity, before you're married. I guess one of the reasons is to prevent, an unwanted pregnancy, and that sort of thing, or having a child out of wedlock. But dating is encouraged almost, because when a couple go to have a premarital counseling, obviously, they've been dating, they've known each other, they do what they do. Mm-hmm. But, so what is this thing about abstaining before you actually get legally married? Is this something that you say to your clients?
Now, that's something that I suggest to my clients if they're not already involved. A lot of my clients, it's probably half and half, and I'm just being honest. If they're involved already, we just talk about different things outside of, like I told you, different things that can help their relationship to be better. Different things that they're challenging with, different things that are going on that they just need some help with. Okay. Now, a lot of my clients, they're abstaining. I mean, seriously, when they come to me, they're at the point where they want to get married. Probably the date is already set, and they're pretty much waiting on that night. They're talking about their struggles. They're talking about different things that they might struggle with, but they are waiting. Like, for instance, my wife and I, we didn't do anything till we got married. That was our conviction. Now, prior to that point now, before I was in the church, my slate wasn't that clean. But when we started dating, we didn't do anything for intercourse until we were married. Now, what are the benefits of that? I mean, first of all, you don't have any, children out of wedlock, disease or anything like that. But also, it really helped us to really foster a strong sense of communication, while we were dating. We had our times when we struggled. I remember a couple times we kissed too long. Like, we need to just kind of back off of this and this is my vision and her vision, because we were on the same page with this. When I saw my wife walking down that aisle, that white dress really meant something. And like I always tell people, I had the shortest wedding reception on the face of the earth. My reception probably about 20 minutes, we were gone. I didn't care who was there. I think there were 500, 600 people at our wedding, and we probably left within 30 minutes trying to, do what we supposed to have done. So, but if couples are already in that situation, we deal with it on a different basis. But that's just my conviction, as a Christian counselor, that's what I'll stand by. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of people say, hey, man, you got to test the water, because let's say if it's not, if she not compatible with me sexually, and that's their truth. But even if they come to me in that situation, I guide them and just help them. Like I even had a couple, very good friends of mine, they actually came up to the conviction themselves that said they were intimate now, but they had said, look, what we're going to do while we're going through counseling, we have 2 more months before we get married. We're not going to do anything else until we get married. So we talked about how to make things right, how to be more sensitive and different things like that, how to communicate, other things that would help foster the romance in a relationship when it came to their intimacy. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Dr. Pope, you would agree with me that of all the ingredients, of all the basic things that you have to have, that sex part becomes one of the biggest things. I mean, a woman will tell you, hey, I'm in my prime right now, and so I gotta have it. Or, you abstain, and then you finally get married, and then you find out that, there are some real bad situations in the bedroom that, oh my goodness, well, what do we do about this situation, And without being detailed or anything, it could be any number of things. So how are you gonna be able to continue or handle a situation that is not gonna go away, it's not gonna change, And then also, you not knowing your spouse that way is okay. I guess we have positive reasons why abstinence is all right. Mm-hmm. But then again, you find out later on that either couple has an insatiable desire, or they can, or they just don't want it at all. No, you can't overdo this, all right? And sometimes they actually draw you up a schedule and say, well, it's going to be once a week, or the other person is saying, no, I got to have it every night. Mm-hmm. Or certain things trigger spontaneous situations, all right? And it's just like so many other scenarios that couples are likely to face that they may not be readily apparent in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I guess our conundrum, and for everybody else, is just worming your way through all the obstacles and just how to handle these situations,
Well, but see, this is what people don't realize. Even if you're jumping in the sack before you're married, situations change anyway.
They will.
And I'm just keeping that 100% real. Let's say if I was with someone, but we were burning up the bedroom in our 20s. When men get to a certain age, most men, that drive is not the same as it was when you were 25 or 26.
Right.
So you can be the stellar Superman who's in his 20s, but when you in your 30s or late or 40s, man, you might be saying, I need once a week, while your spouse might be saying, hey, I need it every day. So the reason why I'm saying that is because people change anyway. Because I hear that a lot of people like, man, I wonder if she, but you don't even know what you have now. Because I'm being honest, I mean, this is an adult setting. When I was in my 20s, oh man, boy, I could easily go 6 or 7 times a week. You know, and I remember one time, one of my wife's, when our first major fight, I remember is one time I wanted to do something and she didn't want to do something. And I think, you know, and I was like shaking her late at night, hey, get up. And she like, honey, I'm tired. And I was like, get up, you know what I mean? I was in the mood. And I remember she said, honey, no, not tonight. You know, I'm tired. And I was like, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. And I walked out the door. And I sat right in the store, like right outside of our door. I sat on the floor. And I said, God, what am I doing? I said, I'm getting this upset over there. Now, 15 years later, the tables turned a little bit, and I'm just keeping it real. And sometimes I'm like, baby, I'm tired. So that's what I'm talking about. Because people talk about sex is just the main thing. But I'm telling you, man, that thing goes up and down. As you get older, your body changes. And it can't be the priority. And that's what I tell people. It can't be number one. Like, it might be number one when you're 25, 26 for men. But when you're 40 as a man, sometimes you might say, baby, can we just do it one day a week? And then on the flip side, I know brothers who, you know, they have to take other things because they're 50 and certain things don't work anymore. So that's why I say that relationship, that friendship, that trust, all of that stuff is so important. Because like one guy told me many moons ago, he said, man, romance is here for women. You know what I mean? He called it the iron and the light switch. I mentioned that in my book. He said men, when they're young, they're like light switches. And women are like irons. Women have to be warmed up. But men, hey man, it's just quick. And I really do believe that. So I tell everybody that, hey, you might say, man, compatibility, and that's important, trust me. Very important.
You and I can both testify to the fact that trust does get broken.
Mm-hmm.
And when that does happen, it shatters a lot. Sometimes people don't ever heal or recover from that, or have a forgiving heart, or get over it and move on. How do we handle that in the home once that happens? Because it does happen, and it usually it doesn't always have to be about, you know, someone cheating or having an extramarital affair. Trust can be broken in so many different ways. Right. For example, if you catch your spouse in a lie, that can be detrimental as well. So, you know, what are the safeguard measures you've got for us, Dr. Pope?
Well, a couple safeguard measures. I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what I mean by that is that everybody is a work in progress. I mean, now, if someone's cheating or something like that, trust me, that's a whole different layer that we can talk about on a different show. But if it's like you said, trust can be broken by someone lying. Like, for instance, in my situation, when we first got married, I share this story in my book as well. When my wife and I was first married, I was in charge of the finances. You know, I said, I'm the man, I'm going to be in charge of the finances. So what ended up happening, this was years ago when everybody, if you bounced the check, they would send these little letters to your house. I don't know if you remember those. So like they said, NCF. So if you bounced that check, guess what? It would cost $22. Right. So I was so off of our finances, I would bounce checks and wouldn't tell my wife about it. So one day she got a letter in the mail and she opened it before I got to it and tore it up. I had about 5 or 6 NF checks that had bounced. And I remember she looked at me and I felt like she wasn't going to trust me anymore because I had violated her trust. I kept saying that, hey, this was all right, but I wasn't on top of anything. I didn't know what I was doing. So this is the deal what I tell couples. When things like that happen, understand that somebody might have just made a mistake, okay? Someone might have made a mistake. And then you do have to show grace. You have to show grace and you have to forgive. And then on the flip side, because sometimes when we mess up, we think that it should be over ASAP. So the person that did the wrong, they got to understand that it might take them several months to develop that trust again, and be okay with that. That they can't put that person on a time frame or schedule. That it takes time to develop that trust. And also, you communicate about how you really feel. Like, instead of just getting mad at that person, just going off on, I hate you, talk about how that lack of trust made you feel when you all are able to come to that dialogue where you can communicate about it. But you have to understand that things are going to happen. And then the big thing, you just have to forgive each other. And sometimes the person who violated the trust, it's harder to forgive yourself when you made a mistake, sometimes than the other person to forgive. And then you got to be patient with each other as well. So those are some of the things that I will say, if a certain level of trust had been violated.
Dr. Pope, I really appreciate your time spent with us tonight. This is very insightful, and I didn't expect any less. Naturally, there's a lot of scenarios out there that need addressing. We can't get into every single detail, but this is definitely going to get to a lot of homes, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of couples will be uplifted by your contribution here. And I'm extremely thankful that you actually made the time to join us on this. And it shouldn't be the only session we have. And I hope that you make the time to join us again sometime soon.
Most definitely, I would love to. I love the platform, and anytime, just call me and let me know.
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been interacting with Dr. Burrell Pope. He's a relationship coach and also in the business of transforming couples' lives. You can look him up on Facebook, Burrell Pope. I will put some information on this show once we wrap it up. And I hope that this information is going to do a lot of good for you, as it has done for me. Thanks again, Dr. Pope.
All right. And make sure that you let everybody know that my new book is coming out.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. So I may have to get on the show for that one as well. We can talk about it.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
All right.
Thank you and have a good evening.
Hey, you do the same now. God bless.
God bless.